friends. We all know that there are bad days and good days. The bad days come and go, and there were just bad days or very bad days. Now the good days stay with us. And tonight, it's gonna be a very good day. And let me tell you how come I know. I was lucky enough to participate in a little Zoom of 400 people, where the two main characters were representatives of the Democratic Club and the other from the Republican Club. And they work together, and they like each other, and they are part of a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus of the government. And then they explain how they work together to solve problems that can only be solved when people talk to each other and listen to each other. Now, is that surprising or what? So tonight, we're going to learn about a bill that they are putting together called the Building Civil Bridges Act, where they're asking the government, the federal government, to work together to finish with this bipartisan way of politicking. But that's going to come later. What we're going to do first, and I'm so excited about that, is that we're going to learn in a mini workshop how to actually do the listening part. And that's what we're going to be learning. I want all of you to please a big round of applause, because this Laguna Woods Village is about to show us that anything can happen. And sitting here with us is the president of the Republican Club and the president of the Democratic Club. So I'm going to ask Ms. Pearl to come here and introduce our wonderful speakers. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pearl Lee. I was pleasantly surprised this afternoon to find out we have, as of today, we have 186 registered members at the Community Village Club. And we've been a club less than 6 months. So who knows, after this event, maybe we will hit 200. Or 2,000. Today, I have a pleasure to introduce not only one fabulous speaker, not only two fabulous speakers, but three fabulous speakers today. So I'm going to read really fast, because if I go over my time, I might have to pay penalty. I will start with Kara Jasinski. Ms. Kara Jasinski is the Executive Director of Resolutionaries, an organization dedicated to bringing Americans together through safe, facilitated conversation. Formerly a corporate facilitator for Fortune 500 companies, Kara turned to bridge building after the 2016 election and the birth of her twins. She believes that never had talking less and listening more felt more important to her. In 2022, Dennis Cohen approached Kara with the idea of championing bridge building on a national scale through a bipartisan bill in Congress called the Building Civic Bridges Act. Inspired by the possibility of returning compassion and respect to the national dialogue, Kara began to spearhead resolutionaries with the advent of the 118th Congress. Our second guest, Dennis Cohen, is a founder of a Center for Enforcement of Family Support in 1979. Dennis Cohen earned the nickname Robin Hood Lawyer for his work chasing deadbeat parents who didn't pay their child support. He was featured as a guest on such programs such as Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, CBS News, Sonia Freedom Live, Michael Jackson, and Bill Handel. His work was endorsed twice in Dear Abby's advice column. Dennis' daily experience as a mediator is watching people who are angry, fearful, and mistrustful succeed with only minimal guidance and encouragement at setting aside their differences and finding solutions to their issues for their own benefit and for the future of their children. If simply talking and listening can work so well for people who are generally at their worst, Mr. Cohen has learned from experience that it can also work for us as a village and as a nation. The process of intentional dialogue has produced abundant evidence that the simple process of being curious and listening can shift the paradigm from fighting over our problems to working together to solve them. Our third guest is Greta Grace. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in practice for 30 years. Greta is passionate about strengthening interpersonal connections through healing trauma, facilitating communications, and empowering heart-centered human experiences. Greta facilitates red tent gatherings specializing with women in menopause, where she offers rite of passage ceremonies to uplevel the mindset around aging and celebrate the life of queenagers. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having us today. I look out at this room, and also earlier today, Rebecca was so kind to give us a tour of your beautiful home. My goodness, right by the ocean with horses, who knew? And flowers in the shape of where you live. What a beautiful space that you've created, and that you're following that up, all of this beautiful natural beauty with being the people you are and being in this room, being willing and receptive to the idea of listening, not just to the people with whom you agree, but also with the people with whom you may not necessarily agree. The thing is, whether we agree with someone or disagree, we often still have to be in community with them, whether that's a large community like yours, the nation, or in our own homes with our own family. So I have a few questions to get us started today, and the first is really easy, just to get us warmed up. How many people in this room, if you'll just raise your hand, how many people in this room are human? Oh, good. Did anyone not raise their hand? If you didn't, I really want to talk to you. Okay, so good. Our arms are working. Okay, how many of you have had perhaps some arguments with people in your life, whether they're related to you or not, about vaccinations? How many of you have had arguments with people in your life about the current president? What about the former president? What about the president before that? I think we could just keep going back in history. Every president, we seem to have arguments over it. And how many people in this room could have had arguments, but have avoided those arguments? Here we are. That also feels pretty binary, doesn't it? To argue, to not to argue. That is not what Hamlet posed at all. And yet somehow it still seems life or death, doesn't it? To argue, to not to argue. I have one final question, or two questions actually. Thanksgiving's coming up. How many people feel a little bit of trepidation around the Thanksgiving dinner table and what might happen there? You all have some very lovely families. Or how many people aren't seeing their family for Thanksgiving for this reason? Oh, the real question. There it is. You avoided conversation. Yeah. And yet we're still related to these people. So how do you have a relationship with people with whom you're avoiding conversation. That becomes quite tricky. Then you're related in name only. Yeah, and you do, and you love them, for sure. They choose the common ground. Well, here's the question. It relates to that very much. How many of you wish that you really had some skills, some tools to help in those situations so that it doesn't have to be an argument, right? That you can still communicate, but it doesn't have to be an argument. Well, that's why we're here tonight. As was introduced, this is our founder and CEO of Resolutionaries, Dennis Cohen, and he's going to lead you on a little baby version of the workshop we do quite frequently around some of those tools and skills that you can use, whether it's Thanksgiving or you're in the laundry room or just in the parking lot or any restaurant for sure. Dennis?
Thank you, Kara. And it's really wonderful to be here in Laguna Woods with the community bridge builders. Until recently, I didn't know that there was an organization of bridge builders here, and I was really excited to find out about it because the bridge building movement is really starting. So many people across the country are concerned about this and are doing something about it. And there are a lot of organizations that are trying to help people have conversations. But it's difficult. I think it's difficult for all of us, no matter how skilled you are, because, well, there's four aspects to it, really. First is, how many people feel like you're living in a different world than the other people who believe something different? Yes? And we are. If we're watching Fox, it's a whole different world than if you're watching MSNBC. About the same things that are happening, or at least the same things that they're covering. Well, the good news is, and this is all part of some of the tools that we can have. There are resources. There are lots and lots of sources that help you kind of suss out the facts a little bit better. Because sometimes it's hard to even understand, like, what is the truth? And what do both sides say about something? And so you've got some links. You can go to our website. And it's not quite up right now. We're doing some construction on it. But by tomorrow, we'll have a list of resources of fact checkers. There's an organization called procon.org that lists the pros and cons of just about every issue you can think of. There are numerous ones. There are organizations that have websites that show you how to spot fake news, how to know if something you're reading is really in a sincere attempt to tell you the truth, or it's satire, or it's completely fake. So these are important when you want to have a conversation to really start to work together to find a shared narrative. One of the tips that I do, or one of the things that I do with my brother, who's on the opposite side of the spectrum from me politically, is I agree to read or watch anything he wants me to, and he'll do the same for me. It's a really great, it's like you're going on a fact-finding mission together. Because really, no matter what side of an issue you're on, you really want to work out the best thing. We all want that. We're just looking at it from different points of view. So that's part of it. You have to deal with the facts of the situation and work together to find a bit of a shared narrative. One of the other things that you need to deal with are the emotions of a conversation. People can get really emotional. You need to be grounded in order to sometimes have these conversations. So we're going to just have a little interlude here, and I'm going to have Greta Grace lead us in just a little practice grounding meditation.
So what is it that we need in order to have these conversations? What do we need? We need a calm physiology. We need our nervous system to be calm. Because if you think about your life, whenever you've gotten into a challenging situation, what's going on with your body? It's revved up, right? You're triggered. There's all kinds of things going on. So every communication will probably break down unless we're in the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So quick review. 2 parts of our nervous system, the stress part and the relaxation part. Okay? Everybody knows about the stress, that fight, flight, freeze. All the blood drains out of our frontal cortex and it goes into our arms and legs and we're ready to fight. And that's what happens when we get triggered. And of course, it's really challenging to listen. It's really challenging at those points. So what we have to do is wait for that adrenaline to pass through our system. It takes 3 to 5 minutes once we're triggered for adrenaline to get recycled through our bodies so we can become present again. So that means slowing it down a little bit, or maybe asking for time to even get ourselves back to be able to have some of those challenging conversations. So what do we need to do? We need to drop in to the gut down here for the relaxation so that we can stay present. So how do we do that? How do you get into the relaxation state? Breathing. Yes, that's exactly it. So all of us have access to that. And what I want to just do here is just for a moment, we're going to take a couple of breaths together. So you can lower your gaze or close your eyes, whichever comfortable. We're going to take 3 or more breaths together. And I'm going to just walk you through that. When you take that breath, see if you can bring the oxygen into your hearts. And then make that exhale longer than your inhale. Make it have a long tail. Push all that oxygen out. And now take another breath in at your own pace. And this time, when you bring it in to your heart and you allow that exhale to drop out, see if you can push your belly button against your spine and squeeze out more of that oxygen with your long, long exhale. That's going to be very calming. It's going to give you more of a quiet mind and a calm heart. And just take one more breathing into your heart. Long exhale. Push out like a straw. Push out that exhale. Beautiful. Now coming back into the room. What did you notice? What did anybody notice? Just in taking a minute. Calmer? Heard a little bit of calmer? Our physiology can reset in something as simple as what we have all the time with us. So, we can always take a moment for that, breathing with the person that you're talking with. So it's really important to learn what is your stress signature. Because when you know what that is, because sometimes we get triggered and we don't recognize it right away, and we come out with reactivity rather than an ability to reset. So I want you to just scan your body. Like, where does stress show up for you? Do you have tightness in your jaw? Does your gut get tense? Do you notice where your tongue sits in your mouth? I notice when I'm calm, my tongue is resting. When I'm stressed, my tongue goes a little bit back up against my top teeth. Like, our body is giving us immediate cues faster than our brain can work when we're triggered. And if you know what your signature is, you're going to be able to immediately take that breath and allow yourself to calm. So, what we know is that when emotions are high, what happens to our intelligence? Low, right? So we want to continue to work on a few more tools. Another one is to ground, is to drop our awareness down into our heart, down into our hips, down into our feet, down into the earth. So just do that while you're sitting in your chair. Just bring your awareness down your body and notice how that feels. And now push your left foot into the floor. And now rotate, put your right foot down into the floor. Beautiful. What do you notice with that? What do you notice? It's a little bit of another way of bringing the energy down so we have more resourcefulness up here, which is what we want. So there are little tips to do. It's also helpful to have an anchor. Now, my anchor is thinking about water, thinking about a river, thinking about a flow. Let's keep in the flow. Let's keep in the flow. And for you to have what is a word or what is a way that you can signal your body to remind yourself to come back to center. Some people put a thumb in the center of their palm to say center here so we can have a good conversation. So if you get triggered, there's a few other prompts. You might say, I really want to hear what you're saying. Could you say that, all of that in one breath for me? It allows people to summarize their thought. They don't go on and on and on and on and on. They say it, here's my one breath. I'm going to say this all now in one breath and be very concise so that you have a contained response. That's one breath. The brain, when we're overstimulated and triggered, we can't handle 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points of view when we're triggered. So another thing you might say is, hey, I'm getting a little bit flooded, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. Can we get on our phones and can we put on a timer and you talk for 2 minutes and I'll talk for 2 minutes and we can try to hear each other that way? So these are some of the tools to help and support having triggering conversations. Hope that's been helpful.
Thank you, Greta. One of the things that what Greta just led us through brings to my mind is how much we actually have control over this. When we talk about divisiveness and polarity, it's really all individuals. And if all of us individuals learned some tools, started to look for commonalities, I mean, the media makes us think that we're all so different from each other. There's such division, and it's there. But there's also a lot of commonalities that you don't hear about. And so focusing on commonalities, common values, doing steps to stay centered and calm, and then learning some tools, some resources. There are a lot of resources about how to have these kind of conversations. There's living room conversations. There's Braver Angels. We have a representative for Braver Angels here. There's a lot of great sources. And tonight we're going to talk about something called the CALM method, C-A-L-M. CALM, and you've got your little flyer. CALM stands for connect, ask, listen, and mirror. So I'm gonna go through that a little bit. We're gonna have an opportunity to do that right here. And we'll all have practiced a little bit of bridge building just tonight. So if you want to have a conversation with someone, you can't just walk up to them and ask, you can just walk up to them and ask a question, but to be effective, you really want to connect with them, create or acknowledge the relationship that you already have. And sometimes that relationship, the experience of the last time you have the conversation is a difficult one. You started talking about something, next thing you knew, you're shouting at each other. So part of connecting might really be, Uncle Frank, last time we started to talk about politics, we got in a big shouting match. It ruined the whole Thanksgiving. I don't want to have that conversation, but I care about our relationship. I want to be able to talk about meaningful things. Would you be willing to try it again? I just learned this new method. It's an active listening method. Would you be willing to try that? Or just being interested about someone and curious is sometimes just say, I understand. Well, this leads into the asking part of it, but I understand that I've heard you talking about this, and would you mind having a conversation with me so I can find out a little bit more. I think the symbol for bridge building ought to be the question mark, because curiosity is really the key to having a productive, pleasant, calm, meaningful conversation. Sometimes you want to have a conversation and pretend that you're from outer space. You're a reporter from outer space, and you want to know what makes people tick. You want to know why they believe a particular thing. And you don't have any preconceived notions about it, so you just want to know. And if you can have that kind of mentality, that asking, that curious mentality, what you do is you kind of free someone up to actually talk, not with defensiveness, not with trying to convince you, but really trying to explain and help you understand their position. And the funny thing is, when you start to understand someone's position, they're no longer the enemy. You don't necessarily agree with them, but at least you understand where they're coming from. And you start to hear, wow, they believe this because this is important to them. This value is important to them. I've got that same value. I may want to get there a different way, but I have that same value. And so you ask these questions, and a question like, how could you possibly believe that, is not a curious question. That's not going to go very far. You're going to end up back like you did last year with Uncle Frank. But a question like, I understand that the way you said, I hear you really have this position about, I really, you think that they're trying to take away the guns, or, whatever the position has to be on whatever topic. I hear it's really important to you. Could you tell me a little bit about why? Have you always believed this? What do you read? How have you learned that? Is everyone that you know, do they believe that? Or, are there some different people in your life that you've talked about this with? So would you be willing to tell me a little bit more? Is it really important, that asking? And then you have to be listening, of course. Not listening so you can respond and argue against it, but listening so you can really understand. So you can be listening for, what's the next question I can ask to explore a little bit more? What are the values that are being, like you might ask that question. I understand that you believe that, but what would you say, why is that important to you? What values are there that make that really important to you? And how strongly do you believe it? Sometimes someone will say something and say, yeah, I'm going to vote for so-and-so. And say, yeah, are you really sure about that? Or are you on the fence about it? It's like, find out. So if you're doing the CALM method, you're actually going through different steps. It's a process, and a process gives you a little bit of guide rails or guardrails so you don't get into trouble. So you listen. And then the last one is you mirror. You just kind of reflect back what you've heard so that they know you've heard, and so you can kind of check in. I heard you say that you think that humans are responsible for climate change. Did I hear you right? And you think that we ought to do away with fossil fuels. Is that what you believe? Okay, well, that's interesting. So going through those 4 steps without offering your own point of view is a helpful way to allow someone to really get into it. And if you're going to do this process, very often you do like a couple of rounds of it, and then you have a chance to switch. So after you've gone through one little round of the connecting, asking, listening, mirroring, you might decide again, connect. Wow, that was really interesting. I don't You know, some of it even triggered me a little bit. Some of it even upset me a little bit. But I want to know more. Are you willing to go on? You've created a little bit of trust that no matter what they said, you still want to hear more. You've connected with them. You've connected with their humanity and your humanity. And then you might ask some more questions that, again, take it down to a different level. I hear in your voice that this is really important to us. You're really, I hear the emotion in your voice. Can you say more? Why is it really important to you? And then you're listening and mirroring. And then, thank you for that. Thank you. I understand a little bit more about your position. All this time I've thought that people who were, anti-vax were this or that. Now I understand a little bit more about the reasoning behind it. Now, would you be willing to switch and have me do it? And that's sort of the agreement that you started with. So then you get a chance to do it. And you can go back and forth, and each time get to a different level. And what happens, and anyone who, Braver Angels, or anyone who's done any of the bridge building kind of work, these communication exercises, find that universally, people who might have been bashing each other on Facebook, all of a sudden understand more. We get back to the humanity that we're really all in this together. We really have a lot more commonality. And that's how you can have that conversation. And we're going to get a chance to practice it. So, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. And I'm going to pose this, I'm going to make this statement. I'm going to ask you to either strongly disagree, strongly disagree, disagree, so strongly disagree, neutral or not sure, agree, or strongly agree. Okay? So the statement is, the Supreme Court justices should be limited at age 85. How many people strongly disagree? Okay. How many people disagree? How many people are not sure or neutral about it? Okay. How many people agree? And how many people strongly agree? Okay, so we have a whole spectrum on this issue. So how about a volunteer who would like to participate and do the calm method? Volunteer someone? I see someone shifting in her seat. Are you getting ready to stand up? Okay, we have a volunteer. Now here's the bonus. You get to do this with Kara. That's connecting.
I know, but it's real. I really like the jacket. Oh, no. Oh, that's real connection. I think we might be sisters now, sharing closets. Dennis?
Yes.
What would you like us to do? I mean, we'll just sit up here and talk about clothes for the rest of the day. Ooh,
Girl,
tell
let
me about your
tell
other
you.
jacket.
Oh, you wouldn't believe where I got it from.
Where'd you get it? Was it a secret designer? Oh, say, okay.
Okay. All right. What's your name?
Annie.
Hi, Annie. Annie, we're gonna Kara's gonna go through that method with you, okay? And then I'm gonna ask you to go through the method with her, okay?
Annie's gonna tell her opinion first.
Yeah, you're gonna ask her questions. You're gonna connect, ask, listen, and mirror, and she's gonna respond.
Okay,
And then you maybe go through it again,
all right,
and then you'll do it with hers, okay?
all right. Do you want to sit down? Are you okay? Do you want some water? Do you need anything to drink? Well, listen, when people come to my house, I just make sure they're taken care of, that's all. I just want to make sure, all right. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking this time. I really appreciate it. You all have such a beautiful community, and I feel very honored to be able to have a real conversation with someone that I've just met. So thank you. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the Supreme Court justices and whether or not you feel like they should have an age limit of 85 or higher, lower, how you feel about that.
Well, rather than make a blanket statement, I believe that in looking at the person and their capabilities and what they can do at any age, rather than blanketly saying, no, it should be a cutoff at 85 or 86 or 30.
So what I hear is that it's less to do with a number and more to do with actual capabilities.
Yes, yes.
And how would you propose that those capabilities be defined, or so that there's a set of common circumstances?
Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't put much thought into that, but I'm willing to look at certain criteria and see if it fits with my belief system. I don't know. I don't have enough information to say that should be a set criteria.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that perspective, that not to stay stuck in just a specific age, but to look at what's beyond that age, which is actual capabilities, and how that could actually be at 85 or 30 or any age in between. Thank you. I'm real grateful.
You're welcome.
Why don't you want to do that same thing now with her?
The same scenario, or can I have a different scenario?
Ask her a different question.
Yes.
Okay.
Start by connecting.
Okay, so how do I connect? I was reading an article in the newspaper recently, and it says that certain people should not have dogs because there should be an age limit on people having dogs. Having dogs. Because the article said at a certain age, people stop picking up after their dog, they let their dogs bark all the time, and it disturbs the neighbors, and people at a certain age just can't care for a dog. Yeah, so what are your feelings about that?
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a lot of opinions about this. First of all, why does anyone want a dog when there are cats in the world? Number one. And if somebody really wants to have a dog, I don't judge. I do not judge if they want a dog. I don't understand why they don't understand the real truth about a cat, but that's all right. And you say this about age, and you say this about dogs and people being too old to take care of them. I have a different question, which is, what about people, the need of them? Yes, there's the caring for the dog, but the other part of that is, why does someone need a dog? And some people might need the dog more if they're older than they do if they're younger. I don't know. And it's not the only person that to take care of the dog. It's not just the person who owns the dog. That person can facilitate other people to take care of the dog. So why in the world are you going to say that person can't have a dog simply because of an age?
You're very passionate about this. I can feel your passion coming out.
I do have a lot of passion about this. I do. I didn't realize that I did.
It's an article I read.
I know, but it's personal.
I didn't even read the article. I just made it.
Maybe somebody should write about this. Somebody needs to write about this. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, now, do we need therapy now?
And Greta's here.
You know what, I just had insight. So we never know what might trigger a person when situations like, just a regular conversation could be triggering, and I just made something up just now.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
So that went well. We had some laughs. But what if she had said, "What? Cats? How can you say that?" Where would it have gone? Where would it have gone? But by staying in curiosity, even about, and look, people are very passionate about their dogs and their cats. It can be a heated conversation, especially with whatever, it's the cat scratches you or the dog poops on your lawn, something. It can get very, very emotional. But by staying curious with someone who was very passionate about it, we got a little, understanding of a point of view. So, you want to do this yourselves? You're excited about it, I can tell. Well, let's start with this. How many people strongly agree with this statement? If it's not chocolate, it's not dessert. Yes. And I assume some people just agree with that. And some people aren't sure. And some people disagree. And some people strongly disagree. But if we're going to have a conversation, we should probably talk about something that matters to us a little bit more. And let's practice this. Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, I'll make this statement. And, okay, so let me go over this again. If you strongly disagree, you're going to hold up one finger, okay? If you disagree, it's 2 fingers. If you're in the middle about it, it's 3 fingers. If you agree, it's 4. And if you strongly agree, it's 5. Okay? All right. So, the statement is, the media is largely responsible for polarization. A lot of 5s strongly agree. Okay. So, we're not going to set you up against someone who's, totally. So find someone next to you, and we're going to practice this conversation around this topic. Now, one of the things that I think we all want to do, thank your partner. So part of this is, what can we do about divisiveness and polarity, right? One is practice conscious listening, active listening, and intentional conversations, and look for people who are willing to do that. Everyone won't be, but some people are. And the second thing is there's a bill in Congress to foster bridge building efforts such as this, and there's a lot of organizations like Braver Angels that, and the Bridge Alliance, Living Room Conversations, Listen First Project, there's all these different organizations. And there's a bill to support them and kind of turn the country, have us remember a little bit how to talk together. And Kara's going to tell us about that.
Thank you so much for going through that little exercise. When Dennis does this, usually it's a 2 to 3 hour process. And so condensing it down into a tiny little piece was really difficult. But we really wanted to give you the idea of what it is to build bridges. That's a buzzword that's starting to go out there of a sector of organizations and people who do this work. They go out into the community, they hold town halls, and they help people have conversation around difficult topics. And those are bridge builders. Now, we first connected with Rebecca and Willie because of a bill that is getting ready to be reintroduced in Congress called the Building Civic Bridges Act. And what it would do is to help foster this field of bridging that is out there in the community. It would create an Office of Civic Bridge Building, which would administer grants that would go out so organizations such as yours could have funding to be able to hold events such as this or others. It would also, and there are several of these bridging communities, bridging organizations that are out there. And it would also fund research to make sure that when these bridging events happen, that it's the most efficacious version of what it is to connect person to person. And then it would also train volunteers who are out there giving up a year of their life in service of their fellow Americans out there in whether it's urban or rural areas. And it would train these volunteers in these bridge building techniques so that when they're out there in an area that is not necessarily one to which they were born, or they encounter groups of people for whom bridging might be helpful, then they're ready. It would also provide grants for libraries, school boards, city councils. Has this been in the news quite a bit lately? So I remember reading an article with a librarian from Des Moines, and she said, I'm just not trained to deal with grown men who are getting into fistfights at a library meeting. She said, no one came to library meetings. No one, absolutely no one ever came to a library meeting, and now they're getting in fistfights, and I am not trained for that. So this would also enable those librarians or those school boards or those city councils for whom they need a little extra support. So instead of just having arguments break out at these meetings or violence in some instances, that instead facilitators or mediators could come in and help the population be able to have a conversation around whatever topic is causing a little bit of a fire. So the Building Civic Bridges Act would do those three core things. In order, we have a big national problem of polarization, but the solution to it really and truly is person to person, heart to heart, understanding to understanding. So this is an attempt by the authors of the bill, Derek Kilmer, a Democrat out of Washington, and Andy Barr, a Republican out of Kentucky, who are coming together to say, hey, let's figure out how we can do this. It's a small bill. It would create a 3-year pilot program with only $25 million? It's the smallest amount. $25 million for 3 years. It's very tiny. But here's the deal. You have to begin somewhere. We have a choice. We have a choice to keep going the way we're going or to make some different decisions of connecting and understanding. And to be clear, just like in this exercise that we did over cats and dogs or chocolate versus whatever other kind of dessert there is in the world, and I don't know what they are, we have a choice to be able to have conversations about that or to just shut down and go into our foxholes. And if you carry that analogy of foxholes out further, there's only one way it ends, and that's not in a democracy. It's not in what we stand for as a country, which is our ability to have free speech and to be able to use that free speech in conversation to really get to the root of problems and to really find some really great solutions and ideas. Because I'm going to bet in this room, if we all put our collective heads together, that we have some really great pieces that could all solve the problem. Just like in that beautiful room of Congress, that they probably, if everybody put their heads together, everybody would have a wise, wonderful piece of solution for whatever problems ail us. So that's the Building Civic Bridges Act. And I really quickly, with the tiny bit of time that I have left, I want to share a lot of the partnering organizations that we're working with represent a lot of different sectors, because several people have different concerns when it comes to the polarity in our nation. The first is national security. If we are divided as a nation, we are vulnerable. And there's a reason that the ambassador to the UN under Obama and the Secretary of State under Bush have both called polarization one of the biggest threats to our national security. We are working with veterans groups, where I just got a beautiful letter from a Gold Star daughter who said, "My daddy did not die. I did not grow up without a father. For this country to tear itself apart." Her letter was really powerful. It's also the economy. And you know, like when people work together well, anyone who's been in business, you know this. When people work together well, then money is, you get to put that in the win column of the money sector. But when things don't work together, then you're spending a lot more than you need to. When it comes to our economy as a nation, I'll give you one example. When the debt ceiling crisis happened a little while ago, remember that? Do you remember when Fitch downgraded our credit? What happens to you as an individual when your credit is downgraded? What happens to your interest rate? And what does that mean for what you have to pay in interest? So when that happened to us as a nation, that downgrade in our credit translated into billions of dollars that we will now have to add to our debt. I don't want to pay billions of extra dollars simply because there's a bunch of Congress people who can't figure it out. That's not okay. And that's not Democrat or Republican or Independent. That's just not okay. You don't get to give that bill to me or to my children or to anyone else. To you. The other thing is business. We just talked about that when it comes to the economy, but there are several large corporations that are incredibly concerned about the polarization and what that means to workers who are on the floor of the shop, who are building things side by side, who are at a desk or a cubicle side by side and who don't know how to have a conversation, who are living in a culture that is so polarized that all of a sudden they have to figure out how to solve a problem for the corporation, but they don't know how to have a conversation together. That's bad for business. To that point, there's also several organizations that represent colleges and universities who are incredibly concerned because they're seeing their graduates or their students come in and they don't know how to have a conversation with someone who hasn't come from the same place that they've come from, who doesn't believe the same things they do. And when they graduate, they're not ready for the workforce. Back to that point of business. It also comes down to health. I don't know if you remember, but a little while ago, the Surgeon General published an 85-page report. Who remembers seeing anything about that? Maybe? So that report was on a epidemic that has hit our country. And the Surgeon Generals have reported on these epidemics quite frequently in the past. They reported on, for instance, the dangers of smoking for the first time. That's when we really learned that those things are dangerous. And this past spring, when our Surgeon General published his report, he said that this is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that is the epidemic of loneliness. And in his report, he talks about our current culture of polarization as one of the causes. And that also translates into just who we are in our communities and in our families. I know this polarization in politics, it's hit my family. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think it's hit others. So it doesn't matter what tier you're talking about. If you're just talking person to person, community members to community members, or you're actually looking at how we function as a civic organization, as a city, or as a nation, we're affected on all of those levels by this one thing. Now again, this bill, the Building Civic Bridges Act, is very small. But again, we have to start somewhere. And the best place to begin is right here. This is the flyer that everyone should have gotten when they came in, and if you didn't, it's right outside on the desk, the table when you came in. This QR code, if you scan it with the phone that's on your camera, will take you to our website. And I'll tell you what that website is. It's also on here. It's resolutionaries.org. So if you want to know how to spell resolutionaries, it's right up here up top. And when you scan this, it's going to take you to an advocacy tool. You plug in your zip code and your address, and I will tell you all of the information that it's asking for on there is because the congressional offices require all pieces of that information. It's one of the clearinghouses they have to make sure there's not spam. So they ask for things like your prefix that has to be filled out. They ask for specific information because that way it's not a bot that's putting things through. They know it's a real person. And when you do that, there's a box. We filled out the beginning and the end of the letter so it's simple. You don't have to use it. There's a button you can press to not have any letter. You can just use your own. But if you want to make it easy, there's just a text box. Click on it and tell the story of why this is important to you. Is it because of national security? Is it because of the economy? Is it because you're worried about your children or your grandchildren and their future, or just their ability to be educated and to work in the workforce? Or is it because of the health of our communities and of ourselves? Whatever it is, it's okay. Just tell your story. Tell why it's important to you. When we speak with our friends on the Hill, they say so rarely do they get real letters. They get form letters all the time. They get organizations that are trying to get people to send things in, and they all send the same letter. Guess how many times when the AARP has a campaign and they ask you to send it in and it's just a click, guess how many votes all of those thousands and thousands of letters count for in a congressional office? One. But because they don't get people who write real letters from the heart, when they get one, it's worth guess how many letters? 100. So your voice counts. What we have found from the letters that have come back, I did not expect this at all. A lot of people are receiving calls from their congressional person, and not just like a form, like just a, hey, thanks for doing this, but multiple calls over until the congressional office actually connects with the constituent because they actually want to have a conversation with them about why it's important to them. I don't know the last time my congressional person called me and really wanted to have a conversation. And to be clear, their office, not the actual person. So thank you so much for having us here. I really hope that we're able to come back and do a longer 2 or 3, I mean, I know that's long, but a longer, fuller thing. But in the interim, please scan this. Tell your friends, tell your family about it, and that way we can get at one of the biggest roots of nearly any problem that we have today in our culture, in our government, is just the fact that we're not talking. So let's get back to talking and listening. Thank you.